It's time to take this miserable anime season out back and put it down with the rest, because we're wrapping it up with my thoughts. So in case you missed it, this is a bookend to the whole affair, where I gave my impression on the first episodes of what me and my Patreons picked. So now it's time for the follow-up on how things panned out. Whether I liked them, thought they were okay, or flat out thought they sucked harder than your mom last night after she tucked you into bed. Sorry, that was a bit uncalled for this early in the video, but maybe you'll understand more why after I talk about this season. The good shows this season were few and far between, since everything ended up pretty damn bland, but there were a few worth talking about. So let me get into what I would recommend people to check out a few months down the line. I don't think it's any surprise that my dress-up darling made its way to the top, as it pretty much embodied everything people like about anime. A romance story about a shy, nerdy, but good-hearted guy who wins over the hot popular chick who's outwardly an otaku even among her friends. But that's not the only reason I liked it, because it's actually a well-handled sweet romance story about two characters supporting one another where they needed it. Wakana gives Marin the support she needs to fulfill her dreams of cosplaying characters she likes as a form of expression, while she in turn gives him confidence, as well as a friend group who appreciates him and his nerdy interests on a genuine level. The budding feelings these two have built a strong foundation for why we're invested in them as characters, as we see it seed, and even sprout when Marin realizes that she has a crush on the guy making her cosplay. The animation for this really knew when it should go all in, as some of these scenes are really detailed and show the character's feelings well, and when it broke its style, it did so for gags and with a purpose. It showed a phenomenal understanding of how to tell its story visually, and Cloverworks really went above and beyond on this one. Absolutely check it out, even if the ecchi is a turnoff, because it's handled well by being about the anime fandom itself, in universe as it is in real life. A slightly weird addition this season was Akebi-chan no Sailor-fuku. I have some strong feelings about this series because it sure as shit has its moments. As it's presented, this is an anime about a girl going to middle school and she's excited because she was the only kid in her class in a rural elementary school. She now actually has a chance to have friends and do the whole club thing because she missed out growing up. Great. On that front, it's a well-executed slice-of-life series that explores just about every aspect of middle school, with a cast of awkward dorks trying to live their best lives in a new experience. The cast is unique, genuinely relatable, and funny, as well as clicks on a group level, so any member feels like they belong. However, what was really distracting here was how weirdly fetishistic this series was. Now, it's not overtly sexual, but there's a lot of scenes framed on toes and feet uncomfortably often, voyeuristic moments out of nowhere, and just a lot of underlying sexual tension in its presentation that comes off as too often to be pure coincidence. You know, I thought this might have just been a horny director, but it's in the manga too. Perhaps it stands out due to just how well Cloverworks animated this series, as they try their damnedest to show the bombastic energy of Akebi as often as they can, and for that, it's both technically impressive and incredibly immersive, so I liked it, if not also feeling the need to explain to anyone watching that there's an unhealthy obsession with feet in this series. So keep that in mind. Kaijin Kaihatsu-bu no Kuroitsu-san was a fantastic comedy that married slapstick and parody well. I absolutely love this series for how it handled a world with a number of competing evil organizations of varying respectability as a sort of underground marketplace on world domination, as the hero business has become just about as commercialized as the shows themselves in reality. So saving the day is a business with incredibly localized heroes fighting world-ending threats, while the same evil organizations hold meetings amongst themselves to coordinate business plans and have friendly exchanges of information. It feels like corporatization taken to the most logical extent, if Sentai and magical girls were real. And that's funny to see how the job market's impacted, how retirement pans out, and ultimately the fate that befalls the monsters of the week in these series. While the animation wasn't technically impressive, the series pulled no punches in offering parodies by coming up with a number of different heroes and villains to throw in as gags, and even giving a ton of them theme songs to run as the ending credits. That's not a poor use of budget if it's so incredibly on brand for the franchise, as well as amping up the comedy through a part most people just skip. This was a great comedy. Check it out. Sasaki to Miyano was a real treat. Fantastically artistic, likable characters breaking out of the typical shonen eye roles, and surprisingly cute. The series took its premise of a guy way too into BL tropes and used it against itself in a way to not just highlight the humor, but the romance as well, as their relationship doesn't really fit into the genre molds, even when they try and classify it as such. I think this is one of the few gay romance stories I've consumed that actually grapples with the obstacles of sexual attraction, where one party doesn't even think they're into the same sex. But hey, at least they come around to trying it. And surprise, it's the one who's into all the gay shit. It was certainly a pleasant surprise that fueled a compelling story as the two leads struggled to click into a romantic relationship, and most other stories on the market just tend to ignore the fact that sexual preference is a thing. I loved how well this was animated too, utilizing a lot of artistic expression to showcase how the characters are feeling rather than relying on the tired tropes of inner monologues. Now it uses them still, but they're broken up by shots of changes in the environment to add artistic weight and metaphor into scenes. A visually engaging and more complex story than the comedy and slice of life tag would imply, so definitely check this out. Yeah, it's still no surprise that Vanitas no Carte is still in my top spot, as not only did I like Season 1 a lot, I praised the hell out of it in my year-end review, and I'm still praising the second core here, as the series pushed forward with still impressive animation, a strong story to follow, and showing a raise in the stakes that makes me want to stick around for even more. The longer this goes on, the more invested I am in the world and the cast. Not to mention the animation in this core was fantastic, as reality itself bent during the Bisque Vorden arc. I think I've said just about all I can about this franchise already, so check it out if you're looking for a well-animated action, comedy, romance, steampunk vampire series. Middle of the pack, and this is where the shows didn't leave much impact at all. These are the ones that either have a conditional recommendation, or had a few things holding them back from greatness. I'm sure placing Fantasy Bishoujo here is going to get more than a few people pissed off in the comments, but while this show improved from its initial episode, I found it wasn't exactly drawing me in. It certainly had a lot to say about the isekai genre with how it lambasts the tropes, but ultimately it feels like an isekai series written as a sort of anti-isekai, where it doesn't do so much as play off the tropes, but just make fun of them blatantly. Am I against that? No. But I felt this could have been a better parody of the genre than it was. But what it does have is enough over-the-top humor and punching down at an already dead horse of a genre that it's sure to get a few laughs out of people. Hell, myself included. The comedic pacing of the jokes is actually a highlight for this series, even if I think it could have gone further. Hakozume could have stood out more this season if it actually cared to. A slice-of-life comedy series about the daily misadventures of neighborhood police officers is ripe for jokes, but I think the series blew all it had in the first few episodes. Kinda packed all those jokes you would expect pretty early on, meaning the core concept felt more like a gimmick rather than a theme. It never really had a defining moment for why I should like it, but I will give it credit, it didn't stray too far from reality, reminding us at times that the police handle some really fucked up situations, giving us a few moments where, I kinda got hit in the feels, and I wasn't really expecting that from this series. I would say it's still in the same vein as many of the office comedies that we've seen before. So, yeah. Because idol shows are getting boring, cue spliced in voice acting into the formula. Now did it succeed at that? Absolutely not. As it took the overplayed tropes of the idol genre of a large cast of cute girls forced to live together and charging towards their dreams with zero experience and minor setbacks, and tried to apply that to the plot of Girlish Number straight, without any of the biting criticism, self-reflection, or cynical humor that series exuded. That means we're left with a squeaky clean image of the anime industry. You know, like it's not fueled by the tears and broken dreams of countless animators, seiyus, and creatively bankrupt producers. This felt like a sanitized version of what anime actually is. And while that left us with a perfectly serviceable story about a large group of girls defined by their one character trait living their dreams, it felt hollow. Probably because this series isn't really doing anything besides trying to sell the core cast as cute girls doing the otaku wet dream shtick the industry continues to beat into the ground. I know I'm being harsh on this, but it raises the question of why this exists. It left such little impact on me with its poorly utilized budget and generic plug-and-play premise that I practically forgot about it until over halfway through the season. If you're looking for the anime equivalent to a mouthful of lukewarm water, this was it. Koroshi suffered from the problem of not knowing what it wanted to be. Did it want to be a quirky romance story with an off-color premise? Or did it want to be a gritty action series that was borderline too gruesome for television? Unfortunately, it tried both. And when we have chibi scenes with a stalker who happens to be a world-class assassin following around a girl obviously not interested as they murder a bunch of people, we get a series that feels like it's not taking itself seriously and also gravely misunderstanding what makes a romance tolerable at the same time. It ended up just coming across as gross in all the wrong ways when it came down to it. Despite a somewhat intriguing plot, interesting characters, and a situation I could have seen myself invested in if it was handled well. Either tone down the edge and creepiness, or stop trying to make a romance look cute when it's actually creepy. Though I'm sure this played right into a certain subset of people. You know, the ones who like Twilight and 50 Shades of Grey. Since Slice of Life was all over this season, Slow Loop was another in a long line of just not standing out. The characters were likable enough, the plot was digestible, and the art was even cute at times. However, it just didn't make a lasting impact due to how by the numbers it was. It didn't try to be inventive with its animation, and the core cast was too standard to warrant it anyway. With a generic boisterous older sister type who's childish and good at cooking, a Shiamoto type who's actually reliable and soft-spoken, and the soft-spoken, cynical, greedy friend type who orbits around them to spur the framing events for the characters to do. The only thing this had going for it was the fishing angle, and as someone who doesn't really care about fishing, I found that barely interesting enough to get me through each episode, before I'd forget about it until the next week it aired. Unless you're really into slice of life and outdoorsy anime, this is just another dime a dozen cute girls doing a sport anime. And lastly, we've got the shows that didn't fare so well. These are the ones I'd consider bad, and just for transparency's sake, I'll admit most couldn't even carry my attention enough to make it more than a few episodes this time. That's saying something. I honestly thought Kenja no Deshi would at least be a so bad it's somewhat entertaining sort of isekai, but after the first episode spent half of its run as an info dump on the game world, the second half was a cringy RP session, and then piled on a bunch of garbage CG, my expectations were thoroughly at rock bottom, as it seemed the studio didn't have the slightest interest in making this series engaging on any level. By the time the real storyline kicks off, it was too late for me to even care as the core cast was a collection of tired tropes. An OP main character with an honestly pretty lame power to just summon an army, and most of the issues I had in the first episode just kept coming in those to follow. This one lacked a moment that made me want to keep watching, and having seen so many goddamn isekai, I wasn't really enjoying this one at all. Doll's Frontline left such a poor impression on its first episode I never picked it back up. It wasn't just that the episode was bad, but it spoiled the entire setting for me that I couldn't bring myself to care in the slightest. It wore its gacha game origins on its sleeve, leaving an easily replaceable cast and bland setting at its forefront, on top of the poor editing, stilted animation, and honestly nonsensical plotline. The obvious question of why should I care when the series did everything in its power to make me not, that hung over this whole thing, and ultimately I decided I didn't. Yeah, so I dropped it without looking back. That was easy. This may surprise some, but even though I found the first core of Realist Hero tolerable, I think whatever goodwill it built was used up quite quickly this season. Mostly because it felt like it wanted to focus on a bridge between the first core and a possible second season, as it never really materialized the second arc to follow. Rebuilding the kingdom, the rebelling dukes, and the war in the first half flowed into one another quite well. Each problem informs the one coming later, but after the reparations and subsequent annexation, I kept waiting for something else to happen, and it just took too long for it. It started focusing on side characters, complicating this world's lore in a cringy way with this fantasy world having higher levels of technology buried in its past. And hey, I have a great idea. Let's focus on a slave trader for some reason. And I don't know, isn't there a demon lord they're supposed to be fighting? Yeah, is it just me or did this get off track? This was a letdown when the series needed to up its game. And now I know I'm gonna piss some people off because Are Fureta was in the same boat. I made my thoughts pretty clear in my preview, that I felt the first quarter of the first season was this series at its strongest, but the first episode of the second season was such a letdown I couldn't bring myself to even pick it back up. Was this even worth talking about? Not really. I think that abysmal first season spoiled this series for me, and since the first episode here didn't have enough intrigue and they kept rolling with that terrible CG, I wasn't feeling it anymore. I'm sure those who liked the first season or liked the light novels love this continuation, but for someone who only consumed the anime and was lukewarm on it, it didn't bring the necessary oomph to carry me further. Orient was another series I dropped because it was just trying too hard to be unique that it didn't feel cohesive. Some people love the clashing aesthetics a certain subset of shonen manga go for, but for me personally, I found myself bored by the core struggle and turned off by the exaggerated style to care. Is that a fair assessment? Probably not. But I think it's pretty telling when the plight of the main character in the first episode isn't even concrete. I feel like they lucked out that the bad guys in this series are cartoonishly evil. That's all I can really say. Now, I actually watched all of Shikakuman no Saikyo Kenja, and I still found it awful. This was the budget version of any OP fantasy protagonist series that's come out lately. You know, like the Misfitted Demon King Academy or Last Dungeon Boonies? But where those had a certain charm in the interactions between the core cast, or at the very least, self-aware enough, this played the premise a bit too straight. The character's absurdly overpowered and easily has a solution for every situation, but jumping back into saving the world is just business as usual for him. Like at least Anos reincarnated to create a lasting peace. Lloyd doesn't even realize he's so strong and wants to be a soldier, but this dude reincarnated to become more powerful, despite already being obscenely powerful. It sort of ruins the jokes the series tries to set up, and removes any stakes it builds when the guy cockily steamrolls his enemies. At that point, it's boring and predictable, as the main character lacks an arc, and becomes the character development for his entire traveling group. So yeah, skip this. There's better examples out there. So with that, we can put winter 2022 behind us. I usually like to leave on a happier note, but were you as unimpressed with this winter season as I was? Let me know in the comments, because I felt like I was scraping the bottom of the barrel here. Hopefully next season turns out better. But for now, hey, you've made it to the end of the video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and do all the other YouTube stuff to help the channel grow. You can also join my Discord with a link down in the description. And if you really want to support me, you can head on over to my Patreon and pick up some extra perks, like voting on what I watch next season. That's coming up. Anyway, yeah, thanks for watching.